What would you do if your dad smashed your 10-year-old son's bike? My dad did exactly that when my son refused to let his cousin borrow it. When I found out the truth, I asked him to apologize to my kid, but he wouldn't. Right after that, I went to my car and grabbed a baseball bat. What I did next shocked him. You're probably thinking I used that bat to hit my dad, right? I'm not a violent person, and I'd never hurt the man who brought me into this world. I used that bat for something else entirely. Let's dive into the story. I'll tell you exactly what happened. Before I delve into the details, I would like to extend a heartfelt thank you for taking the time to listen to my story today. Hello everyone. I'm Christian, 35 years old. The story I'm sharing with you today occurred on a weekend in July 2024, a day I'll never forget. My wife and I own and operate a small coffee shop in town. That day, 2 of our employees called in sick unexpectedly. One had a bad case of the flu, the other had a family emergency. We couldn't find replacements on such short notice, so we had to visit the shop ourselves to ensure everything ran smoothly. The problem was that we needed someone to watch Trevor, our 9-year-old son. Right away, I thought of my parents. They'd always promised they'd help whenever we needed it, and I trusted that promise. I immediately called Mom and Dad to ask if they could watch Trevor for the afternoon. They agreed right away. They were free all day and ready to help. Hearing that, I breathed a sigh of relief. As I was getting ready to lock up, Trevor ran over and hugged my legs tight. He looked up at me and said in a pleading voice, "Dad, can I bring my bike to Grandma and Grandpa's? I promise I'll be careful." The bike Trevor was talking about was a birthday gift I just bought him a few weeks earlier. It was a blue sports bike, the kind Trevor had been dreaming about for months. I still remember when he got that bike on his birthday. Trevor was so happy he cried. After Trevor asked to bring his bike, I gently ruffled his hair and nodded. "Sure thing, but you have to promise me you'll take really good care of it." Hearing that, Trevor jumped up and down with joy. He ran straight to the garage to get his bike. I opened the trunk and helped Trevor load the bike in. We drove about 10 miles to my parents' house. The whole way there, Trevor kept talking about all the games he was going to play with his bike. His voice was cheerful and innocent, making me feel good about leaving him at Grandma and Grandpa's. At that moment, I had no idea this decision would lead to a chain of events that would turn my whole family upside down. I had no idea that Trevor's smile that day would soon turn to tears. 4 o'clock that afternoon, the coffee shop still had a few customers sitting around. I was standing behind the counter making drinks while my wife waited tables. Everything was going normally, and I thought today would end smoothly. Suddenly, my phone buzzed with an incoming call. Dad's name popped up on the screen. I figured maybe he was calling to say everything was fine, or to ask when I was coming to pick up Trevor. But the moment I put the phone to my ear, Dad's harsh and cold voice through the speaker made me jump. Without asking how I was, without saying hello, Dad just barked out an order. "Come get Trevor and take him home, right now." Before I could ask what was happening, I heard the dial tone. Dad had hung up. In that moment, my heart seemed to skip a beat. I realized something was seriously wrong. Dad's voice wasn't the voice of someone calm. It was the voice of someone angry. I immediately called back, but Dad didn't pick up. I called a second time, a third time, a fourth time, but it was all useless. Each unanswered long ring made me more worried. My throat tightened as I thought about all the terrible things that could have happened to my son. My wife noticed the panicked look on my face. She came over, looking at me with worried eyes. I told her about Dad's call. Right after that, my wife turned to tell our remaining staff that we had to leave immediately. Luckily, the coffee shop was almost closing time anyway. I handed the items over to the employees, told them to lock up and clean up as usual. Then both my wife and I rushed to the car to head back to my parents' house. The whole drive back, I drove faster than usual. Terrible thoughts kept popping into my head one after another. My wife sat next to me, saying nothing, but I could feel the tension emanating from her. Her hand gripped the seatbelt tight, her eyes staring straight ahead like she was trying to mentally prepare for whatever was coming. We didn't say a word to each other, but we both knew something terrible was waiting ahead. When my car stopped in front of my parents' house, I saw Trevor sitting on the front porch steps. The moment he saw me, Trevor ran toward me, hugged my legs tight, and burst into tears. Crying and shaking, Trevor looked up at me and said in a choked voice, "Dad, Grandpa smashed my bike. He smashed it." What he said shocked me. At that moment, I thought there had to be some misunderstanding. Trying to stay calm, I held Trevor in my arms and gently asked, "What happened? Son? Tell me what's going on." Before Trevor could answer, Dad stepped out of the house. His face was stone cold, without a hint of regret or shame. He stood in front of me, arms crossed, then said in a harsh voice, "Trevor needs to learn how to share. He's too selfish." Hearing that, I let go of Trevor and stood up straight. I looked Dad right in the eyes and asked, "What happened? Why are you saying that?" Before Dad could answer, Mom came out of the house. She stood next to Dad and said to me, "You need to teach Trevor to share with other kids. Hunter wanted to borrow the bike, but Trevor refused to lend it. That's selfish behavior." Right after Mom finished talking, I said through gritted teeth, "So just because Trevor wouldn't let him borrow it, you smashed the kid's bike?" Dad nodded, then answered in a steely voice, "That's right. It's a lesson for Trevor." Hearing what Dad said, I felt shocked. My wife was now holding Trevor, comforting him. As for me, I stood there like a statue, trying to process what they'd just told me. Dad had just admitted he'd smashed my son's bike to pieces. Not by accident. Not an accident, but on purpose. Right after that, I looked around the yard and saw the bike Dad had destroyed. The motorcycle was lying crumpled in the corner by the wall. I walked closer, and the shape of the motorcycle stunned me. The front wheel was bent and twisted, spokes broken everywhere. The handlebars were folded over, the brakes ripped off. The seat was cracked open on one side, foam showing through. The frame was warped, and the paint was scratched all over. The bike Trevor loved was now just a pile of scrap metal. At that moment, anger flared up inside me like a flame. I walked toward my parents and asked straight out, "What's wrong with my son refusing to let someone borrow his bike? This is his bike. You guys don't have the right to make my kid share his bike. And you definitely don't have the right to destroy his stuff." Dad shook his head, then answered me coldly, "You spoil Trevor too much. Family has to love each other. Trevor needs to learn that." In that moment, my heart felt like it was tightening. I remembered my own childhood, all the times Dad forced me to give my toys to my brother Anthony. Those painful memories came flooding back, making me feel like I was watching history repeat itself with my son. I tried to control my emotions. I pointed at the camera above the yard, then said to my parents, "I want to see the security footage. Right now. I don't believe what you're telling me." Dad frowned, then said harshly, "What do you need to see the camera for? Don't you trust me?" Still maintaining my firm attitude, I looked Dad straight in the eye and answered, "I want to know what really happened." Honestly, I didn't completely trust what my parents were saying. Trevor had never been the kind of selfish kid who wouldn't let others borrow his toys. After arguing for a while, Dad finally agreed to let me see the camera footage. He took out his phone, opened the security camera app, then rewound the recording. Mom stood next to him, arms crossed over her chest, still showing no sign of regret. As soon as the video started playing, I saw Trevor happily riding his bike around the yard. A few minutes later, Hunter appeared. The boy was about 10 years old, a little taller than Trevor. Hunter ran over and said something to Trevor. I couldn't hear the audio, but I saw Trevor nod and then hand the bike over to Hunter. Hunter then started doing wheelies, trying to pull off dangerous tricks. He tried to keep his balance but eventually lost control. The bike fell to the ground. Trevor ran over right away, helped the bike back up, and checked for any damage. Hunter then approached again, asking to borrow the bike one more time. Trevor shook his head, clearly refusing. The two kids started arguing. Hunter pointed at the bike, talking nonstop. Trevor shook his head firmly, hugging the bike tight. About a minute later, while the two kids were still arguing, Dad appeared in the frame. He walked out into the yard, looking at the two children. Hunter immediately turned to Dad, saying something. I could guess he was telling him that Trevor wouldn't share the bike. Trevor quickly tried to explain, pointing at Hunter, then pointing at the ground where the bike had fallen. Trevor's mouth was moving constantly, clearly telling the story of how Hunter had done wheelies and crashed. But Dad didn't listen. He shook his head, then pointed at the bike, gesturing for Trevor to share. Trevor shook his head, hugging the bike even tighter. Dad then lost his patience. He stepped closer, bent down, then used both hands to lift the bike high. Trevor quickly let go, looking up at Grandpa in fear. And then Dad slammed the bike down hard onto the yard. Once, twice, 3 times. Each time he slammed it down, the bike broke more. The wheels bent. The handlebars snapped. The seat cracked open. Trevor burst into tears in the video. My son tried to run back over, but Mom had appeared, holding Trevor back. Hunter stood watching, not showing any shame or regret. He even turned away, abandoning Trevor, who was crying. When the video ended, I couldn't find words. I felt like a heavy stone was pressing down on my chest. I saw my son crying until he was exhausted, saw his birthday gift smashed to pieces, and saw Dad do all of that without hesitation. After watching the whole video, I turned to look at my parents, my voice shaking as I asked, "Did you see that?" Trevor did let Hunter borrow the bike. My son wasn't selfish at all. Hunter was the one riding recklessly, but you punished Trevor. Instead of admitting his mistake, Dad still kept his stubborn attitude. He looked at me, then answered coldly, "Either way, family has to love each other. Trevor needs to learn how to share and forgive." Hearing that, I felt like there was an invisible wall separating me from my parents. I looked Dad straight in the eyes, then said in a firm voice, "So why didn't you use words instead of actions? Why did you destroy a 9-year-old stuff? Did you see how scared my son was? Did you see him crying?" Hearing my questions, Mom jumped in, trying to defend her husband. She said to me, "We're teaching Trevor about family love. Don't you understand?" In that moment, I realized I'd lost something precious that I could never get back. Not the bike, but my trust in my own parents. After watching the video and hearing what my parents said, I was exhausted. I didn't want to make this bigger than it already was. After thinking it through, I looked my parents straight in the eyes and said in a steely voice, "I want you, Mom, and Hunter to apologize to Trevor. Right now. If you do that, I'll let this whole thing go." As soon as I finished talking, Dad frowned and said harshly, "Apologize? Why should I apologize?" I tried to control the anger that was rising, then answered, "Because you were wrong." The camera caught everything. Hunter's the one who should be punished, not Trevor. Hearing that, Dad shook his head and said to me firmly, "Trevor needs to learn how to share and forgive. That's a more important lesson than some bike." I looked at Dad, then asked, "What lesson?" "A lesson about destroying a 9-year-old's property when he didn't do anything wrong?" Before Dad could answer, Mom jumped in and said to me, "Don't talk to your father like that. We're trying to teach Trevor about family love." Right after Mom spoke, I turned to look at her and asked, "Family love? You call smashing a 10-year-old's bike family love?" Mom didn't answer, just looked away. At that point, I took a deep breath, then turned back to look at my parents and said, "Last chance. Will Dad, Mom, and Hunter apologize to Trevor or not?" Dad looked at me with cold eyes, then answered in a steely voice, "No, I don't have anything to apologize for." The moment I heard those words, my heart felt like it was being squeezed. In that instant, I realized I was standing in front of an unbreakable wall. After my parents refused to apologize to my son, I realized they would never admit they were wrong, and that was something I couldn't accept. I turned to look at my wife, then said to her decisively, "Stay here with Trevor. I'll be right back." My wife nodded. She held Trevor tight in her arms, comforting him. As for me, I walked outside, opened my trunk, and pulled out the baseball bat I always keep in my car for protection. When I walked back into the yard carrying the bat, my parents were standing on the porch. They looked at me with surprised faces, not understanding what I was about to do next. I didn't say anything. I just walked straight to Dad's Toyota Camry, parked in the yard. The moment I raised the bat high, Dad yelled, "What are you doing?" But I didn't answer, nor did I stop either. I swung the bat down, smashing hard into the windshield. The sound of breaking glass rang out in the quiet space. I hit it a few more times until the entire windshield was utterly shattered. Dad ran out, trying to grab the bat from my hands. But I pushed him away, then turned to look at him with cold eyes and said, "You broke my son's bike. I'll break your car. We're even." Dad's face turned red with anger. He pointed at me and yelled, "What are you doing? Are you crazy? I'm calling the cops." I looked Dad straight in the eyes, not afraid at all, then answered in a voice so calm it was cold, "Go ahead. But you destroyed a 9-year-old's bike. I think the cops will punish you harder than they'll punish me." Seeing Dad and me arguing, Mom ran out, trying to break it up. She said to me, "Stop it, don't do this anymore. We can sit down and talk." I turned to look at Mom, then shook my head and answered, "There's nothing left to talk about. You guys had a chance to apologize to Trevor. but you refused. So this is the consequence. After saying that, I walked toward my wife and Trevor. I held my son in my arms, then looked straight at my parents and declared, "From now on, stay away from my son. You're toxic grandparents. I don't want Trevor to go through what I went through." My parents looked at me with shocked eyes. Maybe they never expected the day would come when I'd dare to stand up to them. I was no longer the son who always gave in and put up with things. For my son, I was ready to do whatever it took to protect him. Walking out of my parents' house, I felt something profound inside changing, like spring silently awakening new life. It was the feeling of freedom, the feeling of protecting my child from people who could hurt him. After I declared I was cutting ties with my parents, I turned around and walked toward my wife and son. My wife was still holding Trevor, comforting him. She looked at me with worried eyes but didn't say anything. I hugged both of them, then whispered, "Let's go home." Trevor nodded. He didn't say anything, just hugged me tight. We walked out of the yard and got in the car. As the car was leaving my parents' house, the air inside felt thick and suffocating. Trevor sat in the back seat, silently looking out the window. He wasn't crying anymore, but I could see his cheeks were still wet with tears. My wife sat next to me, staring straight ahead, not saying a word. I drove in silence, trying to focus on the road, but my mind kept spinning with everything that had just happened. I just smashed Dad's car windshield. I just cut ties with my family. I just done something I never thought I'd be capable of doing. My hands gripped the steering wheel tightly. I felt my body shaking, not from fear, but because the anger still hadn't cooled down. The image of the smashed bike, the image of Trevor crying his heart out, the image of Dad standing there with that cold face showing no regret, it all kept repeating in my head. About 10 minutes later, my wife turned to look at me, then said gently, "I support you. You did the right thing." The moment I heard my wife say that, my heart felt a little lighter, but the thoughts kept circling in my head. I hesitated for a moment, then asked my wife. I thought about calling the cops, but in the end, I didn't do it. "Do you think I was wrong?" My wife turned to look at me, then asked back, "Why didn't you call them?" I sighed, trying to find the words to explain. After a moment, I answered, "I wanted to call them. When I saw the bike smashed like that, I immediately thought about calling the police. But then I thought, if I called the cops, this whole thing would go public. Mom and Dad would have to be embarrassed in front of the neighbors, in front of their friends." I paused a bit, looking straight ahead at the road, then continued, "So I decided to teach them a lesson a different way. Dad smashed Trevor's bike, and I smashed Dad's car to give him a lesson. That way, at least the family's reputation stays protected. Mom and Dad don't have to be embarrassed by the neighbors." Right after I finished talking, my wife squeezed my hand tighter and answered, "I understand. I think you did the right thing. You protected Trevor while still saving face for Mom and Dad." Hearing my wife's supportive words, my heart felt much lighter. I knew my wife understood me. She understood why I did what I did. She didn't judge me, didn't think I'd acted too extreme. That night, after Trevor and my wife had gone to sleep, I sat alone in the living room. Childhood memories flooded back like an unstoppable tide. I remember when I was 8 years old, Dad bought me a remote-control toy car. I'd been dreaming about that car for months. When I got it, I was so happy I cried. But that joy didn't last long. Just a few days later, Anthony wanted to play with my car. I refused because he already had tons of toys of his own, but Dad forced me to let him borrow it. Anthony played with the car carelessly and eventually broke it. When I cried and complained to Dad, he didn't blame Anthony at all. Instead, Dad told me I needed to learn how to share and love my brother. I still remember when I kept crying and wouldn't stay quiet. Dad grabbed the broken toy car. He took it to the backyard, then used a hammer to smash it completely. I stood there watching, tears streaming down my face, while Dad told me that if I didn't know how to share, I wouldn't get to have anything at all. From then on, whenever Anthony wanted to borrow my toys, I gave them to him right away. I was scared Dad would smash more of my toys if I didn't let him borrow them. I was scared of having to witness again the sight of things I loved being destroyed right before me. I remembered another time when I was 10 years old. Dad had bought me a new jacket for winter. I really loved that jacket. It was warm and beautiful. But Anthony wanted to wear it. Dad made me let him borrow it, even though the jacket didn't fit him. Anthony wore the jacket out to play, and eventually tore it to pieces. When I cried, Dad just said it was an accident. and I shouldn't care so much about material things. That feeling of injustice has eaten away at my psyche since childhood. I always felt like I wasn't as crucial as Anthony. I always felt like Mom and Dad didn't love me the way they loved my brother. Those memories were still there, just as painful as they had been back then. And when I saw Trevor being treated the same way, I felt like I was seeing my own past through my son's eyes. And now, seeing Dad do the same thing to Trevor, I couldn't accept it. I didn't want my son to go through what I went through. I didn't want my son to grow up feeling abandoned. The next day, while I was at home with Trevor, the doorbell rang. I opened the door and saw Anthony standing there, his face scowling. He walked in without waiting for me to invite him, then turned to look at me with angry eyes and said, "What did you do to Mom and Dad?" Dad called me, said you smashed his car windshield. I looked him straight in the eyes, then answered calmly, "I did what was necessary to protect my son." Anthony shook his head, then continued, "You went too far. Hunter's just a kid. Kids playing with each other, breaking each other's stuff, that's normal." Hearing that, the anger inside me flared up again. I stepped closer to Anthony, then asked him coldly, "So Trevor's just a kid too? Why didn't anyone protect him? Why did Dad smash his bike?" Anthony frowned, then answered, "Dad was teaching Trevor about family love. Don't you get it?" I shook my head, then continued talking to him. "I understand perfectly. Dad always took your side. Dad always forced me to give my stuff to you. And now Dad's doing the same thing to my son." Anthony looked at me with a surprised expression, then said, "You were always selfish as a kid. You never knew how to share." Hearing my brother say that, I couldn't take it anymore. I pointed toward the door, then yelled in Anthony's face, "Get out of my house, right now." Anthony looked at me with a shocked expression, but eventually he turned around and walked outside. Before leaving, he turned back and said, "You're gonna regret this decision." I didn't answer, just shut the door. I leaned my back against the door, trying to calm down. I knew my decision was right, even if it cost me my family. About a week after that incident, I bought Trevor a new bike, one that was prettier and better than the old one. The little guy was pleased, but I could see there was still some wariness in his eyes. Trevor was scared that the new bike would also be taken away or destroyed by someone. I spent more time with Trevor, teaching him to ride his bike, playing ball, and reading books together. I wanted him to know that Dad was always here, always protecting him. My wife would sometimes ask me if I had any regrets. I always shook my head. I didn't regret protecting my child. I didn't regret cutting ties with people who didn't respect my family. I also learned a lot about myself. I knew that sometimes, cutting ties with toxic people is necessary to protect your own mental health and happiness. I realized that family isn't everything if they don't know how to respect and love each other. After the incident where Dad smashed my son's bike, I completely cut off contact with my parents and Anthony. I blocked their phone numbers, didn't answer emails, and avoided any chance of running into them. A year passed in silence. No one contacted anyone. I focused on building a separate life for my little family. My wife was always by my side, supporting me in every decision I made. Trevor gradually got over the pain. The little guy would sometimes mention Grandma and Grandpa, but not with longing, but with fear. He understood that his grandparents had hurt him, and he didn't want to see them again. Once, when we went to the supermarket, Trevor saw an older man who looked like my dad. The little guy immediately grabbed my hand tightly, hiding behind my back. I looked down and saw that Trevor's face had gone pale. His eyes were wide with fear. I knelt, hugged Trevor in my arms, then whispered in his ear, "It's okay, son. I'm here. No one's gonna hurt you." Trevor nodded, but I could still feel his body shaking. In that moment, I realized that the pain my dad had caused Trevor wasn't just about the bike. It was about trust, about the sense of safety that a child needs to have. Another time, when my wife asked Trevor if he wanted to see Grandma and Grandpa, the little guy shook his head firmly. Trevor didn't explain further, just said, "I'm scared of Grandma and Grandpa. I don't want to see them again." My wife looked at me with worried eyes. We didn't force Trevor to explain. We just hugged him in our arms, letting him know we understood and respected his feelings. I also realized that Trevor had become more cautious around older people. He was no longer as innocent as before, no longer easily trusting others. That broke my heart, but it also made me more determined about my decision. A week before I decided to tell the story, my parents showed up at my house. It was a Saturday afternoon, and I was inside with my wife and Trevor. The doorbell rang, and when I opened the door, I was shocked to see my parents standing there. Mom brought a new bike, precisely like the one Dad had smashed a year earlier. Dad stood next to her, arms crossed, his face no longer as stern as before. Before I could say anything, Mom stepped closer, then said to me in a shaking voice, "We were wrong. Mom and Dad realize we hurt Trevor. We want to apologize." I looked at Dad, saw him nodding too. Dad stepped forward, then said to me in a deep voice, "I let my anger cloud my judgment. I'm sorry for hurting him." Hearing those apologies, I didn't feel happy or relieved. Instead, I felt angrier. I looked my parents straight in the eyes, then asked them coldly, "It took you a whole year to realize this?" Trevor couldn't sleep for many nights because he was scared. He's afraid every time he sees an older person who looks like you. Did you know that? Mom stepped closer, trying to grab my hand, then said to me pleadingly, "We want to make it up to Trevor. Give us a chance. We promise we'll never hurt him again." I pulled my hand back, then shook my head and answered, "No, you already missed your chance. Trevor doesn't want to see you again, and I respect my son's decision." Right after that, Dad stepped forward, then said to me sternly, "We're family. The family needs to learn how to forgive one another. You should teach your son that." Hearing what Dad said, I couldn't take it anymore. I yelled in my parents' faces, "Family has to know how to respect each other first. You guys didn't do that. And now you want to come back like nothing happened? No way." Mom started crying, but I wasn't moved. I'd seen enough fake tears from them. I didn't believe this late apology. Not wanting to argue anymore, I looked at my parents and said straight out, "Go away. Don't ever come back." Right after saying that, I turned around and walked into the house, shutting the door. After closing the door, I stood still for a moment, trying to process the emotions surging inside me. My wife didn't say anything, just stood next to me, giving me time to think. A few minutes later, I looked through the window and saw my parents still standing outside the gate. Mom was still crying, and Dad was trying to comfort her. Seeing that, I felt a slight pang of heartache, but not enough to change my decision. The new bike was still lying outside the gate, like a silent apology. But I knew that a bike couldn't erase the damage they'd caused. Couldn't erase the nights Trevor couldn't sleep because of fear. Couldn't erase the pain my son had gone through. My parents stood outside for about 10 more minutes. Then they left the bike there and walked away. I watched them go, my heart still full of anger and pain. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about my parents' apology. I remembered how Dad looked at me, his eyes no longer cold like before. I remembered how Mom cried. Her tears seemed genuine, but I still couldn't forgive them. The next morning, I decided to ask Trevor's opinion about my parents coming back. I didn't want to settle without consulting my son. After breakfast, I sat down next to Trevor, then gently asked him, "Son, Grandma and Grandpa came to the house yesterday. They want to apologize and see you again. Do you want to see them?" The moment he heard that question, Trevor's face went pale. He shook his head firmly, then said to me in a trembling voice, "I'm scared of Grandma and Grandpa. I don't want to see them again." I hugged Trevor in my arms, then whispered in his ear, "I understand. You don't have to see them if you don't want to." Trevor nodded, then hugged me tight. He didn't explain further, but I could feel the fear in his body. He still hadn't gotten over the pain Dad had caused. After asking Trevor's opinion, I still couldn't shake the thought of my decision. Later, I shared my story on an online forum, hoping to get advice from outsiders. And just like I thought, the reactions were very different. Some people commented that I should be the peacemaker. They wrote things like, "Your parents already apologized, you should give them a chance. Kids will forget, but if you cut ties, Trevor will grow up without grandparents." Another person wrote, "Family is everything. You shouldn't let a small incident like this destroy family relationships." Yet another person commented, "Your parents realized their mistake. They spent a year reflecting and decided to come back and apologize. That's a big step forward. You should treasure that." Those comments made me rethink everything. The biggest question in my head was, should I be the peacemaker? Or should I listen to Trevor's opinion? If I become the peacemaker, I'd have to convince Trevor that his grandparents have changed, that they deserve forgiveness. But doing that would mean I'm ignoring my son's feelings, teaching him that his feelings aren't as important as family peace. On the other hand, if I listen to Trevor's opinion, I'd have to accept completely cutting ties with my parents. That would mean Trevor would grow up without grandparents. However, before making my final decision, I would still like to hear from people who have read this story. What do you think? Should I be the peacemaker? Or should I continue protecting Trevor from people who hurt him? Please leave your thoughts in the comments below. I hope to receive sincere and objective advice from you. Because this isn't just my decision, it's Trevor's future. I want to ensure I'm doing the right thing for my son. That's the end of my story. And if this story touched your emotions, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss other real-life stories. My story ends here. Thank you for following this long story. See you in the following stories. I'd never seen my mom's aged hands tear up a family photo she cherished. But that night, she did it right in front of all of us. Can you imagine? The gentlest woman in the world, standing in the middle of a room decorated with warm Christmas lights, tearing apart her own family's memories. Each sound of ripping paper rang out like a chisel hitting all our hearts. This is the story of a 7-year-old child, my daughter, being excluded from a family photo, and how my mom taught us a lesson about self-respect that I'll never forget. Before delving into the details of this story, I would like to express my sincere gratitude for taking the time to listen to my story today. Hello everyone. I'm Daniel Wilson, 35 years old. The story I'm telling today happened on Christmas night last year, when I had to face contempt from my own family. I earn approximately $38,000 per year from my taxi driving job. Not a lot of money in an expensive city like Boston, but enough for us to rent a small apartment in a working-class neighborhood. My wife, Rachel, is an elementary school teacher with eyes that always shine with faith in good things, no matter how difficult life gets. We have a 7-year-old daughter named Lily, who is the greatest source of happiness in my life. On Christmas afternoon, our apartment was filled with excited preparation. In the small living room, Lily spun around in front of the mirror, wearing the red dress we had bought on sale for $25, which she loved. Her eyes lit up with the pure joy only children have. Just as Lily did a perfect spin in front of the mirror, she looked at me with bright eyes and asked, "Daddy, am I pretty?" I knelt to my daughter's level, feeling my heart melt at her innocent beauty. With a gentle smile on my lips, I softly replied, "You're the most beautiful princess in the world, Lily." From the small kitchen corner, Rachel carefully wrapped a gift for my mom, a knit scarf we'd carefully chosen. Her skilled hands tied the bow, while her eyes occasionally glanced at me, full of worry. When Lily had run into her room to get her things, Rachel softly asked me, "You okay?" After a deep breath, I looked straight into Rachel's eyes and confessed, "It's just, I know what Amanda and Erica will be like." Through the window, I looked at my old taxi parked below, both our only means of transportation and the primary source of our family's income. That old car was my pride, but in my two sisters' eyes, it was evidence of their younger brother's failure. Amanda and Erica always looked down on my taxi driving job. But anyway, that was adult business. I never thought they'd mistreat an innocent child, especially my daughter. After more than 30 minutes of driving, our little family's car finally came to a stop at the yard of the house where I grew up, filled with beautiful memories. The only thing I regretted was the absence of the father I loved. He'd passed away 3 years ago from a sudden heart attack. However, that didn't make Christmas at my mom, Helen's, house any less solemn, because she always tried to maintain all family traditions, no matter how difficult. Amanda's shiny black Mercedes and Erica's luxury SUV parked in front of my mom's house like a silent declaration of the wealth gap between us. My old taxi looked so modest parked next to those expensive cars. Walking into the warm living room, we were greeted by a space already filled with laughter and warmth. Amanda, my 42-year-old eldest sister, was standing by the fireplace with a glass of red wine in her hand. Her perfectly dyed hair, designer clothes, and sparkling jewelry accentuated her position as marketing director, earning a $150,000 annual income. Although beautiful and successful, Amanda was still single, a fact she never wanted to mention. When she saw us, Amanda asked with a light smile, "Daniel, you're still driving that taxi? Haven't thought about changing careers?" Feeling blood rush to my face, I tried to stay calm and replied, "It's honest work, Amanda. I don't see anything to be ashamed of." Erica, 39, was sitting on the expensive sofa that I knew my mom had bought with her own money. As the wife of the renowned Dr. Bryan, Erica resided in a mansion in the affluent district. However, it is notable that her husband was absent from this family occasion once again. Right when my daughter ran over to say hello, Erica looked her up and down and commented about Lily. "Oh, that red dress is cute, but seems a bit simple for a special occasion, doesn't it?" In the corner of the room, my cousins wore custom-designed clothes, playing with expensive electronic toys that Lily could only dream of. They didn't even invite her to join. After a few seconds of small talk, my mom stepped out from the kitchen with a warm smile. Though she tried to treat her children fairly, her eyes still clearly shone with pride when looking at her two successful older daughters. Throughout dinner, Amanda continued to talk about her upcoming European trip and the new Mercedes she just bought. Her voice sparkled with joy as she told everyone, "Mom, I just booked a European castle tour. The first-class plane tickets alone cost almost $10,000. Not to be outdone." Erica also seized the opportunity to brag about her new house and her children's expensive private school. With a voice full of pride, Erica told my mom, "My kids just got accepted to Oak Ridge with a $50,000 annual tuition. But of course, that's a worthy investment for the future." Seeing me silent, Amanda shifted the conversation, asking with teasing eyes, "What about you, Daniel? Does taxi driving pay enough for a domestic trip? Maybe some budget resort somewhere?" I felt Rachel's hand grip mine tightly under the table. She shook her head lightly, her eyes urgently reminding me, "Hold back, honey, for Lily." I swallowed the words I wanted to say, feeling like there was a burning coal in my throat. Every year, I promised myself I wouldn't let my sister's taunts hurt me, and every year I failed. At that moment, Lily sat quietly next to me, not daring to play with the other children for fear of breaking their expensive toys. Every time she glanced at her cousins, I could see admiration mixed with barely hidden sadness in her eyes. Dinner proceeded in an undercurrent of tension, but none of us suspected the worst moment was yet to come, when my mom announced it was time to take the traditional Christmas photo in front of the tree. Maybe for the rest of my life, I'll never be able to forget the look in my daughter's eyes at that moment. Lily's red-rimmed eyes, standing alone in the corner of the room with a crumbled cookie in her hand, while the other grandchildren, Emily and Nathan, Erica's children, along with Amanda's Pomeranian named Duchess, wearing an expensive bow, were lining up in front of the Christmas tree for the special photo my mom wanted to hang on the wall. Earlier, I'd only been gone about 5 minutes to get a phone charger from the car. How ironic that such a brief moment had created heartbreak for a growing child. When I left, my mom excitedly announced to everyone, "Now, I want to take a special photo of all my grandchildren to hang on the wall. My grandchildren's photo. This is our family's annual tradition." But reality wasn't as perfect as my mom wanted. Just returning to the living room, I saw Lily standing alone in a dark corner. While Emily and Nathan were dressed in their custom-designed clothes, the Duchess was being pampered by Amanda in front of the camera. My daughter stood silent, her small shoulders shaking with each suppressed sob. With my heart clenching, I approached her, kneeling at her eye level. I gently asked Lily, "Why aren't you in the photo with your cousins?" Lily didn't dare look me in the eyes. With trembling lips, she whispered, "Aunt Amanda said I'm too ugly and would ruin the photo, told me to stand here and eat cookies." Blood rushed to my face. I felt anger surging as I looked toward the tree. Dog Duchess was even placed on a red velvet pillow. They stood in perfect line, like a perfect Christmas card, but missing my Lily. When she saw my face change color, Lily, with teary eyes, gently tugged my sleeve. "Daddy, I'm not as pretty as Emily and Nathan, am I? Even Duchess gets to be in the photo." My daughter's guilt-filled whispers burned away all the patience I tried to maintain. Standing up abruptly, I walked toward the photo group. As soon as she saw me approach, Amanda, with obvious annoyance on her face, said, "Daniel, the kids are taking photos for Mom's album. We'll take photos with Lily later." From the kitchen, Rachel, with pained eyes, stepped over, understanding the situation. I saw my wife freeze, her hands clenched into fists, as she tried to suppress the rising anger. With a voice trembling from emotion, I looked straight into my sister's eyes and asked, "Why isn't my daughter allowed to take photos with the other grandchildren?" Amanda, with her familiar eye roll, thinking I was overreacting, replied, "Oh, come on, Daniel, don't make a big deal. Look at that dress. We're taking beautiful photos for Mom, not school pictures." Feeling anger rising, I clenched my fists to control myself, but my voice still rang out stronger than intended. "That dress is her favorite Christmas dress. The problem isn't the dress, it's how you're treating my daughter. You mean she's not good enough to be in a family photo, but a dog gets to participate?" Behind me, Lily's choked sobs rang out. She couldn't hold back anymore, and her crying was like knives stabbing straight into the fake atmosphere of the room. Rachel quickly ran to hold her, but her eyes didn't leave the confrontation between me and Amanda. In that moment, I realized a harsh truth: people weren't afraid of hurting a child. They only cared about perfect appearances, about material things they could show off. But what hurt most came from the very people who grew up with me, those I'd once shared childhood, joys and sorrows with. And oh, absolutely not. I almost screamed, no longer able to contain years of accumulated anger. With all my emotions exploding, I shouted at my two sisters, "I've endured your contempt long enough, but I will not let my daughter suffer the same." Amanda, with cold eyes and a contemptuous smile on her lips, looked at me like looking at an inferior creature and said, "Daniel, come on, don't overdo it. We want to take a beautiful photo. It's not our fault if you can't afford to buy your daughter decent clothes." In an instant, the room seemed to stop breathing. Those words stabbed straight into me like a sharp blade. From the corner of my eye, I caught Lily trembling in Rachel's arms, her eyes full of fear. My throat choked up, but I couldn't stop anymore. With extraordinary effort, I lowered my voice, each word clear and sharp, looking straight into Amanda's eyes and said, "This is not about money. This is about how we treat each other, about the values we teach our children." Without waiting for Amanda to argue back, I took out my wallet, pulled out a folded paper, and slammed it hard on the table: property ownership certificates along with images of a house under construction. I pointed to those papers and said, "You think you know about me? This is the house Rachel and I are building with money we've saved over 7 years. Every single penny. We chose not to spend on frivolous things, but to build a future." The effect of this action was excellent. Amanda's mouth dropped open, eyes wide with amazement. All her pride suddenly disappeared from her face. At the same time, Erica stood motionless, her eyes wavering between the paper and house images, her expression changing from arrogance to confusion in an instant. Erica, with a stammering voice, losing her usual confidence, said, "But, I thought I didn't know that." Exactly. I looked straight into Erica's eyes, feeling the advantage shift to my side, and continued, "You know nothing about our real lives. You see an old taxi and a cheap dress, then judge." Amanda, not willing to lose easily, regained her balance. With a red face, a mix of shame and anger, she shouted, "You're being overdramatic. A house paper doesn't change the fact that you're still the most pathetic one in this family." The words were like pouring oil on fire. I stepped close to her face, pointed toward my daughter, and said with a steely voice, "Exactly this kind of judgment. Lily loves that dress. It's not expensive, but it's a special gift. To her, it's the most beautiful dress in the world, because she's wearing it among people she thought loved her." Then, without losing momentum, I turned my target to Erica. "And speaking of family, are your children with Brian during important occasions? Or is he busy again like every Christmas, Thanksgiving, and Mom's birthday? 3 years in a row, right? Not work busy." The unexpected attack hit Erica like a hard slap to the face. Her face went pale, all pride vanishing in a flash. Her hand unconsciously touched her wedding ring, spinning it around like a habit when stressed. With a trembling voice, she protested, "You have no right. Brian loves his family. He's just busy." Emily and Nathan, Erica's children, looked at their mother for the first time with eyes full of confusion, as if seeing a side of their mom they'd never known. Suddenly, like a wave changing direction, I lowered my voice, shifting from attack to understanding, and said, "I may not understand everything, but I know what I have. I'm there every day for my daughter. I read her stories every night. I know her favorite song and the food she hates. That's real wealth. Seeing that my words were having an impact, I turned to Amanda, looking deep into her wavering eyes. With a voice almost whispering, I asked, "And Amanda, you're proud of your success, your Mercedes, and your downtown apartment. But do you have anyone to share that success with? Do you know what it feels like to have someone welcome you home at the end of the day?" The fatal blow. Amanda, consistently strong and never showing weakness, began trembling. She tried to control herself, but could no longer maintain her tough exterior. With a choked voice, she said, "Don't dare. You don't know anything about my life." But it was too late. Tears rolled down her cheeks, perhaps the first time since we'd grown up. In the tense moment, Rachel gently approached, gripping my hand tightly. The warmth from her hand was like a wordless message. "Enough, honey." I felt my anger gradually subside. Silence enveloped the room, thick enough to cut with a knife. Amanda and Erica stood there, no longer arrogant, only pain on their faces. The masks had fallen, revealing real people with all their wounds. Right then, cutting through the veil of silence, a slight sound rang out, choked sobs from the corner of the room. All of us turned simultaneously and saw my mom quietly crying, her shoulders shaking with each sob. Her eyes held no anger or blame, but the deep pain of a mother watching her beloved children tear each other apart. But we had no idea that in those tense moments before, when we were arguing, no one noticed my mom had stepped into the middle of the fight. With trembling thin shoulders and pained eyes, she tried to speak up. "Children, please stop," but her voice was too small, drowned out in our anger. The storm of emotions had swept us too far away. No one could see the small woman desperately trying to make peace. With teary eyes, Helen pleaded, "Amanda, Erica, Daniel, please." She tried to pull Amanda's and my shoulders apart, but her strength was weak against the fury of her grown children. Amanda even pushed Mom's hand away without thinking, too focused on attacking me. Erica continued crying and arguing back, and I, with surging anger, didn't realize she was standing right next to us. Tears rolled down her wrinkled cheeks as she stood among her children, invisible and voiceless in her own home, the home she'd spent her whole life building. All she wanted was a warm Christmas dinner, but instead, she was watching her family fall apart. The arguing continued to escalate, blending with Lily's, Emily's, and Nathan's cries into a chaotic chorus of pain. Helen's voice broke through tears. "I'm begging you children, this is Christmas night. Everyone please," but no one heard. Bitter words still flew back and forth like poisoned arrows, no one caring about the suffering mother. Pushed out of the circle of argument, she retreated to the corner of the room, shoulders shaking with each suppressed sob. Her thin hands hugged her body as if to comfort herself, a lonely gesture I'd never seen from my always strong mother. From the other side of the room, Rachel saw my mom's pain. Through the noise, my wife shouted, "Daniel, Amanda." She tried to point toward my mom, but we were still busy arguing, not realizing what was happening. Helen looked around the chaotic room, her eyes stopping on Lily crying in the corner. The image of the tiny child in her simple red dress, hurt in the middle of a family falling apart, made something inside her break. A change appeared in her tired eyes. In that moment, she was no longer the gentle woman who always tolerated us. As if a hidden source of strength suddenly rose, she walked to the oak table and slammed her hand down hard, shaking the silver plates and crystal glasses, some tumbling to the floor. The bang echoed like lightning in a clear sky, making all of us jump and turn around. The room immediately fell silent. Even the children's sobbing stopped abruptly. "Enough!" she screamed with a voice trembling from rage and pain. Tears still rolled down her cheeks, but her eyes were now frighteningly complex, eyes I'd never seen in my mother. With a voice stern to the point of coldness, she said each word clearly. "You children be quiet now." The firmness made Amanda, Erica, and me step back, as if we'd just been slapped hard across the face. No one dared breathe loudly, completely stunned by the woman who'd never raised her voice in our entire lives. She wiped tears with trembling hands, took a deep breath. Then she walked to the old oak cabinet in the corner, where family memories were stored. In a few seconds, she took out a leather-bound photo album, worn with cracks running along the spine. With hands still shaking, she opened it, turning pages as if flipping through memories. Amanda, Erica. She called her two daughters' names with a voice deep but full of authority. Look here. She pointed to an old, faded photo, and as we silently looked down, I felt time stand still. In the photo were two little girls in simple clothes, standing in front of a cramped apartment in South Boston, my two sisters in childhood, looking no different from Lily today. Mom, what are you doing? Amanda panicked as photo pieces fell to the floor. Before our eyes, an unbelievable scene was unfolding. My mom, with trembling hands, tearing Amanda and Erica out of the old family photo. Each small piece of paper fell to the floor like fragments of love. None of us could speak. This was the family photo my mom always treasured, placed in the most honored position in the living room. Yet now, she was destroying it herself with red, teary eyes. With hands that wouldn't stop tearing the photo, her voice choked with tears. If you think you can exclude family members because of how they look, then I can do the same. Her thin, frail hands trembled, but the tearing motions were frighteningly determined. The last piece, Amanda's face, was torn from the family scene, leaving only the image of my parents and me when I was small. My mom, with eyes full of deep pain, handed the torn photo pieces to Amanda and sobbed, "Here, take them. Because to you, family is only about appearances." Mom's action left Amanda standing like a statue, not daring to reach out for the photo pieces. I'd never seen my sister look so weak and confused. Erica stepped back, as if afraid of my mom's outburst. The room fell into suffocating silence in that moment. Only the soft crying of Lily and the other children, innocent children witnessing a family's collapse. A painful lesson about the consequences of pride. She closed the album with a dry snap, setting it on the table with rare determination. Her hands still shook, but her eyes were steadfast. My mom had changed, in a flash, from a gentle, patient woman to the embodiment of wounded dignity. Helen stood straight, shoulders no longer hunched as usual. Her face was no longer the weak woman we knew, but a mother protecting the core values she tried to teach for so many years. Without another word, she walked toward the door with slow but decisive steps. She took her old coat from the hook near the door, the movement slow but full of resolve. Her petite figure suddenly seemed taller than ever. Erica, with a panicked voice, for the first time I could remember, lost her usual confidence and asked, "Mom, what are you doing?" But Mom didn't turn back, her voice deep, painful but determined. "I can't stay here anymore. I can't bear to see what your father and I built, a loving family destroyed by pride and shallowness." In an instant, she turned around, looking around the room, her eyes stopping on each child. I saw in my mom's eyes not anger or blame, but the pain of someone who'd tried their whole life to create a family, only to watch it crumble in their hands. She said with a voice light as a breeze, "This is my house, but tonight I can't stay. I'll go to Mrs. Miller's next door." Before leaving, she stopped, kneeling in front of crying Lily. Her eyes softened, as if all the hardness was only for the grown children who'd forgotten the meaning of love. With aged hands hugging the tiny granddaughter, she whispered, "I'm sorry, dear. I'm sorry for what happened tonight." Lily hugged her tight, as if not wanting to let go. I felt my own tears falling, as I saw that scene 2 generations hurt by my own family's thoughtlessness. With heavy steps, she left the house she'd lived in her whole life, leaving behind not just a torn photo, but a family facing deep cracks that money and status couldn't heal. The sound of the door closing rang out like a final accusation, leaving us in the suffocating silence of shame. The moment the door closed behind my mom, the room fell into a frightening silence, with only the Christmas music still playing from the old radio, cheerful singing about family love in the midst of a family falling apart before our eyes. The blinking Christmas lights became painfully bright, as if mocking children who didn't know how to appreciate their mother's love or understand the true meaning of family. Amanda stood motionless, her hands trembling as she held the torn photo pieces, tears beginning to roll down her cheeks. With a voice choked beyond recognition, she said, "Oh God, what have we done? We made Mom. Mom never." Erica couldn't stand, had to sit on the sofa, shoulders shaking with each sob. Through tears, she whispered, "In 40 years, Mom never raised her voice at us. Never left like that. Seeing my two proud sisters collapse, I felt the anger in my heart gradually fade. Duchess, Amanda's Pomeranian, whimpered softly and pressed into the corner, as if sensing the heavy atmosphere. In the other corner, Rachel held Lily, gently wiping tears from her face. Emily and Nathan stood together, afraid, holding each other's hands tight, never having seen their mom and the adults in the family like this. I was still angry, but worry for my mom overcame everything. Through the window, I saw snowflakes beginning to fall lightly. With a deep but determined voice, I said, "We need to find Mom. It's very cold out there." But before we could look for Mom, something unexpected happened. Amanda, with still teary eyes, knelt in front of Lily, taking the little girl's small hands. With a trembling but sincere voice, she said to my daughter, "I'm sorry, Lily. I was very, very wrong. I should never have treated you like that. You look beautiful in that dress, wonderful." Lily looked at Amanda with innocent, puzzled eyes, then suddenly reached out her small hand to wipe tears from the proud aunt's face. With a crystal-clear voice, she said, "Don't cry anymore, Aunt Amanda." That simple gesture was like an arrow straight through Amanda's heart. She burst into tears, hugging Lily tightly, all barriers of pride collapsing completely before the child's unconditional forgiveness. Erica also approached, kneeling beside them, eyes red and voice choked. With a face pained by regret, she said to the little girl, "Me too, Lily. We forgot the true meaning of Christmas, of family. Can you forgive us?" Lily nodded without hesitation, forgiveness that only children can give so easily. Then, with eyes full of worry, she asked, "Are we going to find Grandma? Will she be okay?" Rachel came beside me, her warm hand gently taking mine. With a whispered voice full of love, she said, "They're truly sorry, Daniel. And Mom needs all of us right now." I looked into my wife's eyes, then around the room, Lily hugging Amanda and Erica, Emily and Nathan standing nearby with faces that were both confused and hopeful. Taking a deep breath, I nodded. We stepped outside and walked to Mrs. Miller's house in increasingly heavy snow. No one said anything, just footsteps crunching on snow and breath creating white clouds in the cold air. Each of us carried our own burden, guilt, regret, and fragile hope for forgiveness. Mrs. Miller opened the door with a serious expression, already knowing who we were looking for without asking. She led us into the warm living room, where my mom sat curled up in an old armchair, eyes still red from crying, thin hands clutching a cold cup of tea. With teary eyes and trembling voice, Amanda spoke first. "Mom, we're sorry. I was wrong." Erica stepped up beside her sister, voice full of remorse. "All of us were wrong. I forgot what's truly important." Lily broke free from Rachel's arms and ran to hug her grandmother tightly. With a clear voice and teary eyes, she pleaded, "Grandma, come home with us. I miss you." In that moment, my mom hugged Lily tight, tears rolling down her aged face again. She looked up, eyes questioning each of us, then softly asked, "Do you children truly understand the meaning of family?" We all nodded, and I stepped forward, kneeling beside my mom. With a heart full of love, I said, "We want you to come home, so we can be a real family, with everyone." When we walked into our childhood home, snow covering our shoulders, my whole family stood gathered around the Christmas tree once more. But this time, no one cared about the cheap dress or old shoes. No one thought about Mercedes or downtown apartments. Emily and Nathan no longer stood hesitantly by their mom, but mixed in among the adults, holding Lily's hands. All of us, including Duchess in Amanda's arms, stood together, smiles and tears mixed, as we took a photo that my mom always said was the most beautiful one she'd ever taken. A year has passed since that memorable Christmas night, and as I sit here watching my family decorate the tree for the new holiday season, I am amazed at the profound changes that one moment of breakdown can bring. Watching Lily smile brightly as she hangs the star on top of the tree, I silently thank my mom for the valuable lesson she taught us. That Christmas photo with Lily in the middle in her red dress, hair slightly messy from running out in the snow, now sits in the most honored position in my mom's living room. Not because it's perfect, but because it's real. Those tear-stained but smiling faces, those hands holding each other tight, an imperfect photo of a family learning to truly love. Amanda has changed the most. From a woman who only cared about her career, she started seriously dating a music teacher and spends time teaching Lily piano every week. When I see Amanda sitting next to my daughter at the piano bench, patiently teaching each note, I know my sister has found something more valuable than success. With a rare warm smile, Amanda often tells me, the essential things in life are priceless. Erica started marriage therapy with Brian, and for the first time in years, he's become part of our family. Last week, they both attended their son's school performance together, something that had never happened before. I saw happiness in Emily and Nathan's eyes when both mom and dad were there to cheer them on. Our new house is finished. Not a luxury mansion, but a warm home full of laughter. We moved in last month, with help from the whole family, Amanda and Erica painting walls, Brian installing lights, and my mom preparing meals for everyone. The house wasn't just built with bricks and mortar, but with healed relationships. My mom has also changed. She's become more direct about emotions, no longer trying to hide every problem. When my two sisters started arguing about something small during Sunday dinner last week, Mom spoke up immediately, but with calm determination. Sometimes, she told us, families need storms to see their foundation. I still drive a taxi, now with pride, because I know my worth doesn't lie in what others think, but in the love I have in my life. Every evening when I come home, seeing Rachel and Lily run out to greet me, I know I'm richer than any millionaire who doesn't have that. And if there's one thing I want to share with you through this story, it's probably this: a person's value isn't measured by the material things they own, but by the love they give and receive. Appearances are just temporary clothes, while love is what lasts. That's where my story ends. Before closing, I want to ask you, have you ever judged others by their appearance? Have you ever accidentally hurt someone just because they didn't meet your standards? And more importantly, how can we teach our children about actual values when society constantly emphasizes material things? Please share in the comments about a moment when you stood up to protect someone's dignity, or when you wish you had. Because sometimes, the most valuable lessons come from the most painful moments, like a simple red dress on Christmas night. If the story moved you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other real-life stories. Thank you for following this long story. See you in the following stories.